the day, Dr. B.S. Balaji, who is going to talk on the most relevant topic in today's scenario, that is ICT integration for effective teaching learning process. Dr. Balaji is presently working as Associate Professor at School of Biotechnology, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He has done his BSc from Madurai Kamraj University, India, MSc from Mananmaniam Sundranar University, India, PhD from University of Pune, and MBA from Anna University, Chennai. Prior to this, he has worked with various institutions of national repute. Uh, he has also taken many online courses during this pandemic. Swayam MOOC 2019, MSc Organic Chemistry 1, Swayam Prabha 2020 for television broadcast, BSc Organic Chemistry 2, B Pharma, Pharmaceutical Organic Chemistry 3. He has also won Professor P.R. Singh National Level Award for Outstanding Contribution to the Chemistry Education for 2021. He is actively engaged in research. He has 18 publications in peer-reviewed journals to his credit. So there are 325 citations, 10 H-index. He has presented paper in various conferences at national and international level. He has been the resource person for various FDPs, more than 100 FDPs. He has also registered 4 patents, 2 designs, and 1 copyright in his name. He has also provided consultancy services to various organizations, E-Vidya Bharati and E-Arogya Bharati Network Project, Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, from March 2019 to August 2019. He has also held various administrative responsibilities. Regarding professional responsibilities, he is the resource person for UGC FDPs, UGC oriented programs. He has been the subject matter expert for interview panel, Korean Fellowship Program, MHRD. He is editor of International Journal of Social Sciences from 2008 onwards. He is also a reviewer for Royal Society of Chemistry, Elsewhere and American Chemical Society journals since 2007. He is also the member of American Chemical Society from 2004 onwards. So he is actively engaged in research. Now I invite Principal Sir, Professor Dr. Vishal Kumar to formally welcome our guest for the day. Sir.
Thanks, Jinesh. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dignitaries of today's webinar, very eminent resource person, Dr. B.S. Balaji, Associate Professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, Madam Meenu Gupta, Coordinator IQAC, Mr. Jinesh Jain, Coordinator of today's webinar, participants from various states of India, faculty of the college, and my dear students, a very good morning to all of you. At the very outset, on behalf of Shri Aurobindo College of Commerce and Management, I welcome you all in this national webinar on ICT integration for effective teaching learning process. SACCM is one of the best commerce and management colleges in India, which has been taking many initiatives for updating the knowledge of its stakeholders. And I'm really glad today's webinar is also a progressive step in this regard. I must congratulate the organizing team of IQAC for today's webinar on a very relevant topic. Modern day education has 6 main aspects which determine quality education, namely curriculum and learning objectives, learning materials, teaching pedagogy, classroom assessment, teaching learning support, and leadership development. Of these 6, due to COVID-19, 3 aspects in education are being challenged the most. The first one is teaching pedagogy, second one is classroom assessment, and the last one is teaching learning sport. So to evolve and emerge stronger from this pandemic, the sector is already experimenting a few groundbreaking experiments, some of which may be set to bring about paradigm shift in the education sector forever. Fine. So ICT in teaching pedagogy is an important link between course content, educationist, technology, and the most important part, that is learners. So, but there are many other challenges in its implementation, like internet connectivity, telecom infrastructure, affordability, availability of laptop or desktops, free software, educational tools, online assessment, etc. Fine. So, but it is a fact that technology-based education is more transparent, right? So to address all these issues, today we have invited Dr. B.S. Balaji, who is a renowned academician and a very popular MOOC instructor and very good friend of mine. So due to his vast experience, I hope today's session will be very interesting and engaging also. Dr. Balaji, I do believe that your inspiring ideas, profound knowledge, varied experience, progressive views, and wise guidance will enrich the participants with distinguished knowledge about the ICT integration for effective teaching and learning. So I once again welcome you, sir, and assure that healthy discussions will open new vistas to improve teaching learning process in higher education. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Jinesh.
Good morning to
Thank you
one
very
and
much,
all.
sir.
Should I start, or is there some more things you want to say?
Yes,
No.
sir, you can start.
Okay, sure. Thank you. So I would like to thank Dr. Vishal Kumar, Principal Aravindo College. So I know him since 2018 onwards. Like when we started our MOOC development, he was with us, and we used to discuss quite a bit of lots of interactions, how to improve the teaching learning aspects. And as he had aptly mentioned, most of the things what he had actually mentioned, we have been discussing so far, and I'm really thankful to him and the Arabindo College for giving me an opportunity to share some of the experiences what we have been going through so far, because it's a very tough time for all the people, and finding a solution is going to be the real challenge. So not only facing the challenge itself is a challenge, and finding a solution is another big challenge to overcome.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we have been struggling a lot to find some nice ways, like a better way to approach some of the shortcomings and the limitations. So I'm really thankful to the organizers for giving me an opportunity to share some of the experiences which we have been seeing throughout the past couple of years. And without taking much time, I would like to go into the presentation. My sincere request to all the participants is whenever they have any clarifications or discussions, they can stop me then and there, because I would like to keep it as interactive as possible, because I don't prefer, or I don't like the monologue type of approach. So that's what we also insist, and we also want to practice. So that's the reason I request all the participants, so don't hesitate, and there is nothing called the discussion session separately. We can have the discussion in the session itself, so that like the doubts or clarifications are done immediately, so that you don't have to wait till the end of the session. So let me start the session. So is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, sure. So let us start with today's topic, that's ICT integration for effective teaching learning process. And why we have to talk about this, as Dr. Vishal Kumar had aptly said, like, I mean, we are actually being faced with new challenges due to the COVID-19 forced lockdown. So we don't have access or limited access to physical classroom. That is one of the reason. And digital learning is being practiced by many places. Even before we had lots of opportunities, but it was at a very, very small scale. But COVID-19 had actually made it like a national or even the global event. So now we are moving to the online classes, and Zoom, Google, and Microsoft meetings are happening regularly. And of course, there are some negative part is also like too much screen time for the students. So they are also facing lots of difficulties. So how are we going to address all these things? And of course, Sir has said one of the 6 pillars is the online evaluation. So that also we'll have to think like how effectively we can carry out. So some of the aspects I'll be discussing in today's session. So the first and foremost question is, does technology add any value to teaching learning process? So that's how we are actually going to start. So if it is not adding any value, should I even have to go into the teaching learning process, especially integration of technology? So these are some of the questions everybody will be having, and we are going to find out, is it really adding any value? If it is not adding any value, then how are we actually going to do something by which we can actually add values? So that's what we are going to see. So as it's very clearly seen, mere integration of digital tools in teaching learning process does not add any value. So this is the one thing we have to keep all the time, because this is where most of the people just stop. They say like, okay, I integrated many things, but there is no improvement in students teaching learning process. So the very purpose is, simple integration is not the solution. So we have to go one step beyond the simple integration. So that's what we are going to see. Now, as he had very clearly mentioned, like teaching learning pedagogy and the learning outcomes are the one of couple of the pillars for our education system. So first we have to identify what is the specific learning outcomes, what we expect from the students. And if it is going to be done online, we do need to identify what are the specific tools available, because I will give some examples later on so that you will clearly understand. We can't do everything with whatever simple things we are having. So there are very specific tools for some specific task. And we do need to understand what is the context under which we are doing, and what is the rationale for integrating something. And finally, we are going to see integration of digital technologies into teaching learning process. So how do we integrate? One is like a multimedia animation. This everybody knows, so I'll not be talking much about this. The second one is augmented reality. So this is one aspect I'll be discussing a little bit elaborately. Use of open educational resources, use of social media. So these are all the 3 topics I'll be discussing little bit elaborately, how we can integrate these digital technologies in the teaching learning process. Of course, use of MOOCs, most of you are aware. If you are not aware, I can actually give a little bit brief at the end. And now the final question is, should we have to borrow the technology or develop our own technology? So this is the biggest question, because I know what is augmented reality. I know what is OER. Can I implement this in my classroom? So should I have to develop my own augmented reality things, or if it is available in some platform, can I simply use it? So this is the most crucial question that comes to the mind whenever we talk about integration, because technology exists, everyone knows, but how are we going to integrate? So when that question comes, we have to be very clear whether we are going to develop our own technology, or whether we can just borrow or maybe take from whatever is available and we can directly integrate. So first I will start with the SAMR model. So here this is basically substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. So this is one of the way by which we can actually start our integration. So what is substitution? So simple substitution means whatever you are doing in the physical form, you are now going to do it in the digital form. So that is the only thing, simple substitution. So this is the technology as a substitute for whatever we are doing. Say, for example, you are writing with a pen. So this is a physical thing. You have a paper and you have a pen in the classroom. The students are writing. So this is a simple thing which is being carried out in all the classes. So we are going to just substitute this aspect. That means instead of using a piece of paper and a pen, we are going to type the same thing on a computer. So this is the first step. So we are slowly moving from the physical thing to the digital one. So here what we are doing, there is no functional change to the teaching task. So the teacher is still teaching in the class, and the students, instead of writing in a piece of paper, now they type the information in the computer. So there is no functional change in the teaching process. Teaching is one and the same. Now the second one is the augmentation. So once we substitute the physical one with a little bit of digital integration, we are going to augment it. So what do you mean by augmentation? Here we are going to increase some functionality. That means simply students can write some circle or annotate something in the note piece of paper. They can use different color pens and pencils. So all those things now we are going to implement in the digital tool what they are actually going to use. So that means we are going to use annotation, highlight, and adding something to what is actually being done. So we are improving or increasing the outlook of what is being captured. So in the conventional mode, what we say is like once we substitute, then the next step is we are going to just augment it or increase its look or aesthetic. Simply here again, we are not going to integrate any teaching learning process. It is simply the functional improvement of how the process is being done. So that is where this is called as the enhancement part. And the next one is the transformation part. So in the transformation part, the first step is the modification. So here the students are taking the notes. Instead of simply taking the notes, now they are being asked to create some presentation. So that is the next step. We are modifying, because so far what the student used to do, he just writes the notes in the class and then goes and reads. Now we are adding something more in the digital platform. We are asking the student to presentations, that whatever they are doing, that experiment, whatever they are writing, so we are asking them to present in the digital form. So that is where we are doing the modifications into the teaching learning process. Then finally we redefine it. So here the whatever the students are going to present, now the teacher's interventions comes here. So here teacher modifies everything whatever the students are doing. So we are asking them to publish the work. Say for example, the students are asked to present in the classroom, or maybe they are asked to present in a conference or meeting or something. So that is where simple writing in the classroom is slowly being converted into presentation at a major level, or at a internet. The students are asked to present, like we are having here the faculty development program which we are conducting online. So previously we used to conduct all these things within the college or in any place where it is being conducted. From there we are now moving to the entire globally. This program can also be recorded and shared with other people. So that means we are doing the redefinition of how a presentation can be effective. So here instead of just one person interacting, when it is being presented to the entire world, all the people can actually interact, and actually they can also gain some knowledge from this. The next one is the TPACK model. So here technology, content, and pedagogy, all the three are integrated. So what is technology? This is not only we just talk about the technology, we also talk about the ability to use, like we have a mobile phone, we have a laptop, how we can effectively use that, and what are all the different features available. Say for example, if I am using a software, so what are all the different features available in that software, and how effectively I can make use of that. Say for example, this is a presentation. So this presentation is being created in Microsoft PowerPoint. So what is the different features available in this one? Say for example, I can actually write something. Say there is a pen tool available. So I can write. So this is one additional thing. So we can also call this as a annotation. So these are additional things, like not only the technology enables us to present, the technology also help us do something which is little bit more than what is existing. Say, for example, if I want to highlight something, so I use a highlighter and I say, oh, ability to use, I just want to highlight it. So these kind of enhancements are possible when we talk about technology. And unless we know what is possible, so we cannot actually make use of these things. So when we talk about technology, we not only need to know how to use the things and what are the different technologies that are available, and what are the features that is present in that, we do need to know. So that is the technological knowledge we need to have. Then the content, as a teacher, you already know what is the content, so I am not going to talk much about this content. So here we talk about theories, evidences, and how we are going to organize the things. So all those things we talk about the content. And the pedagogical aspect, as a teacher, you have been teaching. So what is the best practices? What are the processes which you have to follow? And all these things are actually individual circles. And when we combine them, that is what is called the TPACK model, in which the teacher, the pedagogical aspect is mainly based on the content, and the content, how it has to be given, is done with the help of technology. So that means the teaching practices, whatever is there, is integrated with the content along with the technology. So that's why we call this as a TPACK model, in which all the three come together so that we can effectively teach some topics to the students. And of course, we will be looking at some of the examples of all these things. So what is the pedagogical aspect, and what is the content, and how technology can help us do these things. So we will start with the first one, which is the technology integration. So many of the challenges what we face in the current world is delivery of lecture is, of course, now it is technology centric, and engagement of student is basically the student centric. And the third aspect is assessment, which is a teacher or student centric. So we have major three areas where we are having some of the challenges. The most important challenge is the engagement of the student, because delivery of the lectures, of course, if you are not familiar with some software, or if you don't have that software, you can actually get support from other things, because there are various open source softwares are available. Say, for example, if you want to create presentations, and PowerPoint, Microsoft PowerPoint is a paid version. So some of the people think like, okay, I don't want to use that. Then LibreOffice is available, which is a open source one. So there people can even download that software, and they can actually make use of it. So for most of the technology delivering lectures, say you are creating a lecture, you want to edit a lecture, you can use some paid software, or maybe OpenShot, or a shortcut, like some open source editors are available, which also you can make use of. So everywhere, whenever you want to do something technologically, there may be an option which is available in the open source for you to carry out. So even though we have some challenges in the delivery of lectures, that can be offset. And assessment is another major area, like if we have to do online assessment, that we will be discussing separately. There are various ways how we can implement it. But the most important problem is the engagement of students. So how do I actually effectively keep the students engaged in this class? So here again, we are going to talk about one important aspect, like augmented reality is one aspect. How we can integrate augmented reality into our teaching learning process, we are just going to see. So here, the learner content interactivity is the most important thing we are talking about. So what are the different types of interaction possible between a learner and the content? It may be a knowledge checks. That means while they are watching the video, you can actually put some quizzes in between, and unless the students answer those quizzes, they cannot move forward. So you can have knowledge checks, or some people they call it like learning by doing approach, where you can actually pause the video and ask the student to recollect what are the things they have studied so far. Maybe ask them to write in a simple piece of paper 2-3 points, and then you continue the video. There you again reiterate, or re-emphasize that what are the important points, and just ask the students whatever they have written and whatever you are telling, whether it is matching or not. So those kind of knowledge checks we can do in our video presentation itself. We can also have separate quiz after the student watch the video. So these are all will make sure the learner actually interacts with the content. So these are some of the ways we can actually employ to increase the, because if the student doesn't watch the video, he cannot answer the quiz at the end of that lecture. Or maybe you can create a quiz specifically asking, at 4 minutes 53 seconds, I talked about a particular aspect about this process. Okay, explain that process briefly. Like that, you can actually ask the question. So this actually forces the student to go and watch the video exactly at 4.53 minutes and then come back and answer your question. So that way, indirectly, we can also force the student to interact with the content. And it should be mainly based on an integrated, and it should be relevant and meaningful, because if we are asking something, and say for example I talked about a concept, and if I am asking a question that is nowhere related to the concept, but maybe it is something related in a very distant way, or maybe that is a important information the student needs to know. So all those things we have to first list it out, what you actually want to ask, and we have to integrate that in a proper way. Otherwise what will happen is student will know lots of information, but they will never gain the knowledge what we anticipated. So just sharing of information is insufficient, and the interaction we have to think and employ in a proper way, so that the student exactly understands what we want him to know. That means the learning outcome should be the basis for designing these type of interactions, and it should have a purpose and a meaning. So that's what is very, very important. And what we should avoid is simply because I have to ask one question, I cannot ask any random question. So that is some of the things we have to avoid. So by that we can actually have some amount of learner content interactivity. So the latest technology, like lots of people are talking, is VR, AR, and MR. So that means basically one is the virtual reality, another one is augmented reality, and the third one is a merged reality. So what are these three terms we will just look at. So augmented reality is merging a computer generated information onto the user's physical or real environment. So we will see some examples like how it can be done or what it is. So that is the augmented reality. And in virtual reality, this is exactly the opposite. So that means the physical person is interacting with the computer generated information to provide a full sense of immersion. So that means they will be wearing some glasses or some specific tools in front of their eyes, and they will be thinking that they are interacting with the digital world. Basically, the physical person interacting with the digital world is basically the virtual reality. And in the augmented reality, the computer made objects are actually kept on the physical world, like in the digital format, they are kept on the physical world. You will not see that exactly, and only in the mobile phones screens, or maybe in the laptop screen, you will see that object being placed, but in the real world, they don't exist. So that is what is the augmented reality thing. And in the mixed reality, we can do both the things. That means physical and the virtual items and the environment are integrated. So here are some of the examples. The virtual reality is given here. So the person is wearing the specific uh, visual set in front of their eyes, and they are actually drawing it with the help of the digital pen. So this is what is the virtual reality. And this is the digital thing which is trying to be kept in the physical world using this virtual reality. In the augmented reality, there is in the screen, mainly in the mobile screen or laptop screen or some other screen, because we can actually place something in front of this one only in the digital medium. So that is what is the augmented reality. And in the mixed reality, so we have the people are wearing the virtual reality glasses, and the digital world is also, the augmented reality thing is also kept in front of the physical world. So they can actually do both the things. Say, for example, these are some of the examples by which how we can integrate, and integrating all these things are a little bit expensive. But I will be sharing a few things mainly about augmented reality, because this is the one we have actually integrated in our online course, and how we have integrated, I'll just talk about. So in the Minority Report, if some of you would have seen this movie, so this movie was taken like around 100 years in the future, how the people can actually stop the crime before even it is committed. So that is what the movie is about. And in this one, he is interacting. See, there is a digital screen in front of him, and with his hand he is trying to move the things from one place to another place. So this integrates, like this is what is called the mixed reality. And the Sixth Sense, I don't know if some of you are heard about this one. So this is Pranav Mistry is one person. He had actually working in MIT labs, and he had created this one. So here what he was doing is he wanted to integrate both the digital world and the real world. So he took a camera, and with his hand gestures, if you look at his hand, he had some tapes put on his hand, and with this one, he was trying to take picture. In this particular example, he is trying to take a picture by simply moving his hand. Like how do I want to capture the picture? So he simply use his finger to click that image like a simply, and this camera, this digital camera, automatically takes the picture without him touching any part of this digital object. So this is what he was trying to do, and here he was integrating the real world objects and the digital world. So what's the difference between the Sixth Sense and the AR? See, in the Sixth Sense, it is integrated the real world objects with the digital world, and in AR, it is the opposite. Digital world or overlays are placed on the real world environment. So how do I actually do that? See, here is an example. So in the COVID-19 fourth lockdown in Kerala, in one of the schools, they have actually brought an elephant into the classroom. So how it is possible? Can the teacher be with this elephant in the classroom? That was a big question, but it was actually made possible through the augmented reality. So in the classroom, if you look at, there is no elephant and other thing. But when the students are watching this classroom video, which is being streamed through the YouTube or other softwares, so there they have physically, digitally included the elephant, and the teacher was actually talking to the students, telling that, oh, this is the elephant and all those things. So here they will be generally using a trigger. So once the trigger is activated, the the digital image, whatever is the image they want to show, can be integrated into the presentation directly. So this is basically the marriage between the real and the virtual or the digital world. So this is one way of teaching, because this was on the 9th student or 8th standard students were being taught about this augmented reality in their classroom. So how do we actually do that? Basically, there are different types of markers are available. One is AR, augmented reality based on markers, or another one is the augmented reality without markers. So what are the different types of without markers? One is a geo-based, that means location-based. Say, for example, a couple of years back, Apple had released this Froggypedia, one augmented reality software, when they were releasing their iPad version to the whole world. So it was basically the location based one. So simply when they take it to on top of a table or something, then automatically the table is the one which triggers the display of the virtual digital image. So that's why they say it is basically geo based or the location based. So you have to just show at a particular location, corner of a room, or maybe on top of the table, something, some location they have to say. And we have some examples, and when we look at the examples, you will know what it is. And the next one is a superposition. Say, for example, marker based one is there is a image. So when you just have the image in the piece of paper, And if you look at the display of the mobile phone, you don't see this image. The black image is not seen in the mobile phone, but you see a house. So these type of images, that means in the real world, there is nothing. There is no house on the piece of paper, but on the screen, when you look at on the piece of paper, we have a house. So this is what is called integration of digital images on the real world. So this is basically a marker based one. So the camera software, the augmented reality software, detects, once they detect this image, then they display the house information. So that is how these things are actually being done. And the next one is markerless. So here we can also talk about, this is related to location. So location means there is a table on this room. So the trigger for this one is whenever you look at the table, so you keep this particular cube and the sphere on top of that area. So this is what is information which is given to that software. So the software automatically detects the table, and then on the tabletop it just displays this image. So this is seen only on your mobile phone screen. This is not in the real world. So that is what is the difference between augmented reality and other realities. So superposition based one. So here what happens is, this is very good for teaching science subjects also. Like if a person just shows their hand, and this software actually reimposes these images in front of that hand, and it says like, okay, what is this part, what is this bone part, and other thing like that. The student can actually learn through these kind of applications. Of course, development of these applications are a little bit expensive, and it should be a dedicated team is required. So I'll just talk about few things how we can actually integrate these kind of things. And another one is the projection based one. So here, if you look at in this one is basically the projection, a three-dimensional projection of a shoe, because this particular box contains this particular shoe. We really don't know what is the size and shape of that shoe. So there will be some marker or some trigger kept on this particular box. The moment you bring your mobile phone in front of that, in that augmented reality application, then automatically it will show that, okay, this particular shoe is the actual dimension. So one advantage of this augmented reality is that many companies are now trying to keep, like for example, if you take Apple, Apple is now releasing various laptops and other things. So they have this augmented reality based application in which you take your mobile phone and just you run this application. It will exactly say if you are planning to buy a laptop, so how much space it is going to occupy on your table. So that will automatically display that in front of your camera, and you can exactly know, okay, what are all the things I require. IKEA is a company which is actually making lots of sofa and other furnitures type of things. So they also have an application in which you can purchase, you are planning to purchase a sofa cum bed. Okay, then where you are going to place it, in your living room or maybe in another hall, whichever place you want to place, then the dimensions of that, if you take the image of that particular place and you superimpose this sofa cum bed on that particular software, then it will exactly tell how much space it is going to occupy. And in the physical world, you can actually find out, okay, what is the best place to keep your sofa cum bed. So all those things without buying, you can actually figure it out. So another thing is outline based, and the location based is many places nowadays people are using Google Maps and other things. So there these kind of things will pop out and tell, okay, there is a restaurant, there is so and so place. So when you are driving, it will automatically show up in that app that these are available. So we talked about augmented reality, how it can be done, but how we can integrate. So one is first we have to create an image what we want to do. So here is an image that is shown here, and I am going to use this image for my classroom teaching. Say for example, this is a cell which I want to talk to the students. So if I want to do a three-dimensional one, I can also convert this into the three-dimensional one. So these are the extra things which we have to do in the background. So these are not available in the software. So we have to separately create these kind of things. And of course, these are available in the Microsoft PowerPoint. So they have integrated some of the virtual reality and 3D models are available, and we can actually integrate these 3D models in our teaching learning app. So once we have this particular image, whatever is converted to the 3D, we can bring into the AR software, that augmented reality softwares, because there is a pretty lengthy process of converting these images into the software readable thing. So that is basically done by the computer science person. As a teacher, I may not be knowing, and as a teacher, I may not even have to know what are all these various steps and other things. Only thing we need is a software developer is required for using these kind of software. So that is the only thing. And most of the places, if you have a computer science person in your college or university, then you can actually explore whether we can actually do this or not. So this is a experimentation part. And in fact, I will show how we have integrated in our MOOC course. I will show in the next couple of slides. So we have to have a marker or something, how it can be triggered. We have to identify, and then finally we share it with the people. So this Microsoft PowerPoint had actually given lots of 3D models. So all these 3D models are available, which you want to integrate in your teaching learning process. You can actually integrate. You can also integrate these things in the AR app. And here the animated animals and other things are given. So these are pretty much readily available. So we don't have to spend a lot of time in creating all these things. Otherwise, it is a little bit a lengthy process. And I'll briefly talk about what are the steps involved. So here is the example which we have actually used in our online course. That is our organic chemistry MOOC course. We have integrated the augmented reality. So this screen, the first screen, I hope you can see that this is the floor on my house. So this is my floor. There is nothing here. And I am using this particular augmented reality software. So this software was developed in collaboration with IIT Bombay. So there was a PhD students who was working on developing augmented reality softwares. So I collaborated with him, and I have actually asked him to create this specifically for my course. And that's why ETIATB is a technology. They have actually developed that software. And this software is mainly for Android mobile phones. So that software development kit, they call it like a .apk. That means application package is available. So that any student or any person who want to use this software has to download it from the Google Play Store. And once they install it on their mobile phone, they can actually start using this. So we have our course material is based on a trigger based one. So if you look at here very carefully, this piece of paper, there is a white paper I have actually kept. So this white paper has the marker. So here some image we have actually created. So that image is the trigger for this software to display the items. So here we have displayed water molecule. So here if you look at on the right hand side, you will see carbone, S carbone, R carbone, erythrochlorobutanol. So some of the chemicals names are given, and we have three axes, X, Y, and Z axis. Three axes are available. So this is for the water molecule. So if you look here, the water molecule is highlighted here. So once you click on the water molecule, that will be displayed on the computer mobile screen. Basically, this is the mobile screen. You can also use it in your laptop also. The only thing what is required is a camera, because this augmented reality application runs through camera. So your mobile phone camera will look at that, and once the mobile phone camera and this augmented reality application looks at this image, then they actually will trigger this particular display of this three-dimensional water molecule on the mobile display itself. This mobile phone only is displaying this information, but the background is my home. The floor of my home is the one which is given. So here we have the X and Y and Z axis. So we can actually rotate the molecule in whichever direction they want. Here is another molecule, which is a borane molecule. So there is a central boron atom and the 3 hydrogen atoms are there. So this is a planar molecule. So these kind of visualization of 3-dimensional images and objects are possible in this particular software. So here again we have a molecule. This is a erythrochlorobutanol is the molecule here. So we have a chlorine group which is represented in the green color, and we have an oxygen which is in the white color, and the ash color ones are carbon atoms. So there are 4 carbon atoms are there. So how this molecule is actually present, the student can actually watch the molecule and they can zoom in, they can rotate, and everything they can do in the mobile phone itself. So this is how we can actually increase the interactivity of the student with the content. So I will stop here, and any questions related to augmented reality I would like to have now.
Any queries related to augmented reality from the audience?
Participants can raise the hand to ask the query and give the rights to on the mic.
If some of you are not aware of this, is also perfectly fine. So don't worry about that. Whatever you think, like whether you want to integrate this for some particular subject or other things, you can actually ask. Otherwise, we can move forward. That's also perfectly fine.
We can move on, I think.
Sure. So my screen is visible, right? Hello?
No, sir, it is not visible.
It's not.
So one is the query from the participant Vikram Seth. So what
Yeah.
is the name of the software that can be used for during the integration of the teaching?
Okay. There are. I will talk about some of these names right now. Is the screen visible now?
No, sir.
So visible.
I think someone is telling it is visible. Is it visible now?
It's visible now, sir.
Okay, thank you, thank you. So how to integrate is the step-by-step approach I will tell, and also I'll talk about what is the software which we can use. The first of all, we have to develop an idea, like what we are actually going to show. See, this is mainly used for showing some experiment, and especially the 3-dimensional things are there in your teaching learning process, and you want to show them how the interactions and other things are happening, especially for science subjects. This is going to be highly useful. Even for mathematics, if you want to show how the elliptical, if you are going to draw a tangential line for an ellipse, and you can actually create the ellipse in the 3-dimensional, and you can also draw the line and show to the students, okay, how you can actually rotate that 2-dimensional object, maybe the 3-dimensional object, and how it actually passes through the center or maybe passes through a particular point. So all those things we can actually show that. So for that, we have to mainly develop the idea. So that is the first step. And then the second step is identifying the platform. So in which platform we are going to actually develop that. And currently, most of the students are using mobile phone, especially the Android one. So we can think for developing it for an Android version, because if you are planning for a Mac, then iOS is the one you have to think about. And these are mainly meant for mobile phones, not for the laptop. So we don't mainly focus on Windows based one, because we have to have the camera should be inbuilt for making use of this particular application. So that's the reason mobile phone is very, very handy, and the students also use a lot of mobile phones. So we have to decide, most probably Android is the platform. And if you know how to export from Android to iOS or other things, that is also perfectly fine. But when you are developing, you have to develop which platform you are going to focus. Then we have to write the program. Of course, this is where I said about we need a computer science person who knows how to write a program for that particular Android application. And we have to create the materials, planes, figures, etc. So Blender is one software which is available for 3D manipulation. And most of the video gamers, those who are playing the video game, generally use these kind of softwares. So this is nothing but we are actually going to get into the video game business only, but in a much smaller scale, and not with because if you look at the video game, they will look for this textures and how the person wears the shirt, or maybe there is a gun, how many bullets can be fired, and whether they can be fired continuously, or all those things they will be taking, like, I mean, okay, this is what are all the things which are required. And okay, if he raises the right hand, what will happen? If he raises the left hand, what will happen? And what is a punch? So all those steps, whatever you are doing in the animation, similar to that in the video game, similar to that, we have to plan for what are all the things students can actually interact, or students can do in our particular augmented reality software. We have to just make a list of the things, and we have to write the program according to that. Say, for example, a pinch is to zoom out. Okay, then how you can expand it, and how do you want to rotate? Right swipe, left swipe, up, down swipe. So all those things, hand gestures, all those things you can very clearly integrate for a particular action which you want the student to perform. So this is where we are going to build that into the AR software and the platform. And then if you want to go with the markers, we have to define what is the marker. It may be an image, or it may be location based, or it may be anything what you plan to, but we have to define what is that marker. And then finally we compile the package and share with the students. So this is the overall view of how we can actually use that augmented reality in our classroom teaching learning process. And of course, advantages we have talked about, like easily accessible to learning materials, mainly mobile phones are used. And this actually increases the students' engagement and interest in that particular subject. So we can also ask a couple of questions related to this augmented reality software that is being given to the students. And it's also possible to integrate some practical aspects of how the things can be done. And the students can actually perform some experiments which are otherwise difficult to perform. Say, for example, a simple thing I'll tell you, as a chemist person, we say, if you put sodium in water, that is going to explode. And this is literally and physically a dangerous experiment to perform. But in the digital platform, we can actually recreate the same thing and tell the student, okay, you take this sodium piece, and this is water in a beaker or maybe in a test tube. You just drop it using this digital platform, and now it will explode. The test tube or the glass beaker will explode. And that you can actually virtually show to the student, so that the student knows, and the experiment can be done very safely without any issues. But now the student knows, okay, putting sodium in water is an explosive reaction. So those kind of things we can actually give a training or give a knowledge to the students in a much safer way. And here are some of the softwares which can be used. Adobe Aero is one. So this is where the Photoshop uses multiple layers of the images. Augment is to create a 3D image, and ZapWorks and HP Reveal, this is formerly called as Arosama. So these are some of the softwares which are available for anyone to use it. And if you are planning to develop a software development kit for the mobile phone, ARKit is for the Apple platform. and Vuforia or Vuforia engine. So this is the most important one, which generally all the video gamers are actually currently using. So this also you can think of using it. And ARCore or Tango is mainly the Google product, and Wikitude, Kudan, AR Toolkit, which is the open source one. If we cannot afford to buy any of these softwares, we can also go with AR Toolkit, which is the open source one. ECAR, Augmenta are some of the softwares for creating. These are mainly for the software development kit. And once you are going to use, especially the computer science person, those who are interested in using, they can actually use in any of these to export that into the required platform. So these are some of the software development kits that are available currently. And now the major challenge what we face is like there is only one open source option. So not more options are available. So that means we have very limited support. And the major important thing, as I mentioned earlier, also we need a programmer. So a computer science programmer is required. Now many people will be asking, we don't have any person who can help us and other thing. The only way is we have to identify or collaborate with somebody who is interested in doing this. And this you can do as a small experiment. Maybe you create some design, what you actually want to show. In the normal video, you cannot show many things in the three-dimensional way because there zero interactivity is there. But when you integrate that into the augmented reality, we are actually putting that interactivity in the hands of the students. And we expect like more students will interact with that particular things. Maybe they will be just exploring here and there. And the students are digitally literate, so they will be very quick to learn many things. So the interactivity part can be increased a lot more if we use these kind of applications. Of course, it is very expensive to implement because we do need some programmer or other things. But we can actually use many freely available images and the 3D objects. For example, if you look at the Microsoft, they have this MS 3D Paint is one option. So you can also use 3D Paint to draw some of the structures. Blender is an open source software. So you can actually create various objects in the Blender with multiple layers, shading and the color and all those things. You can actually create that. So there are lots of softwares which are available, and we have to integrate these softwares to make the final product. Of course, the pitfalls of using to use AR is like a lack of available tools. This is one of the major concern, and the lack of necessary training, because we don't have enough people who knows how to integrate augmented reality. And this is heavily dependent on the hardware, and interoperability is a problem. Like if once it is made for mobile phone, especially the Android one, we cannot immediately directly port it into iOS or other operating systems. So that is a major problem. And the proprietary content have portability issues. That means if you are using Adobe Aero, there are some certain proprietary materials which are available, which you cannot actually export into other platforms. So these are some of the limitations of using AR. The next one is the open educational resources. So through this also, we can actually integrate the teaching learning process, that is digital integration of technologies to learning process. So what do you mean by open? So is this like our Dada coming and asking Sachin Tendulkar, hey, do you want to open? So is it that one we are talking about? Or maybe this opener, which is generally used for removing the cap, or it is a shop that is kept open. So what is the meaning of this open we are talking about? Is it opening a book, or it is the software? If you look at Word, you want to open a document. So what is this actually the meaning of the word open? So open may be related to accessibility. The open may be related to availability. The open may be related to freedom to modify. and also affordability. So this is what, when we talk about open source, that open meaning is not Sachin Tendulkar starting the opening batsman, or it is not the can opener. It is actually the accessibility, availability, freedom to modify, and affordability of educational resources. So this is what is called the open. And educational, as you know, it can be a classroom setup or it may be a training in an industry. So both are called as a educational setup. And what are the resources? They may be digital resources mostly. And what is the open educational resource? The UNESCO has a major broad definition. So open educational resources are teaching, learning, and research materials in any medium, digital or otherwise, that reside in a public domain. So we can just stop here. We don't have to go to the end of the things. So it is educational resources mainly are mainly used for teaching, learning purpose and also for the research purpose. And this is available in the public domain, for which we don't have to pay any cost. That means it is no cost access, use, adaptation, and redistribution. So this is what is the most important thing, because if you look at various online resources, many things are available, but most of the things are kept under copyright. So that means anything that is copyrighted, we cannot easily share. So as a teacher, if we want to integrate a technology into our teaching learning process, we don't have to create each and every time new things, because it is very time consuming and it is going to be very difficult also. So how we can effectively do that? If somebody had created it and if it is available openly, then we can actually use it, so that we don't have to recreate or reinvent the wheel. So what are the types of open educational resources? We can get the entire content. Some lecture notes are possible, presentation, video content, books. So lecture notes and other things, if you search the Google with any topic with PPT or PDF, that will automatically bring out what are all the resources that are kept openly available in the internet. That will automatically come up. So we can actually make use of some of the things. And the video content means basically YouTube is the most important thing. So you type the keyword and if the video comes up, and if it is in the YouTube, so it can be easily shared with other people. So you can also tell your students, okay, this video is a very good video for this particular topic, go and watch it. So the content is already available. We don't have to create new content. And books and journals, of course, Internet Archive is one website where you can actually get lots of information, and that is also giving like a journal also. I will share some of the important open educational resources at later. So softwares are basically open source softwares and open access LMS. Moodle is an open access LMS. Why we have to use these open educational resources? The main thing is you can get resources that are up to date. Many places we get very important information that is being shared by many people. So when it is available in the public domain, we can also make use of it. So it is easily available. And as open means it is free or no cost. So, and in many cases we even get a high quality standard materials that are available, which we can actually share with the students. It can supplement your lectures. So this is the one thing we have to be keeping in mind all the time. Like we cannot take the open educational resource and directly give the students as our substitute lectures. We should never give open educational resource as a substitute for our teaching learning process. What we can do is we have to always use it as a supplementary to our lectures. Then only the students will get a little bit even more information, and there we will not also be held accountable. Otherwise, like if we are asked to teach some topic and if we just take many things from the open educational resource and we simply say that, that means we are not doing our responsibilities. So people will question a lot. So that is one of the reason we have to supplement our lectures with this open educational resources. And it is easy to get and saves lots of time to create it, and it is also easy to share. So once it is available in the public domain, we just take the link and we can share with the students directly. But then what are the limitations? The major limitation is the quality of that material is very difficult to ascertain. So if you look at YouTube, there are plenty of course, all of you know about the fake news. So there are plenty of fake news roaming around in the internet. So how do we know what is the correct one, what is the wrong one? So identifying the quality and the authenticity of that material is very, very important. So if we are not so sure, if somebody says something and whether it is actually the right thing or not, when we are not so sure, it is better not to share, because that is one of the limitations of open educational resources. And of course, many times what happens is, like, I want on topic A, but I get only materials which is related to or very closely related to topic A, but not exactly what is the one I want is not available. That may also happen. And of course, most of the times the internet, we get lots of information related to English, but other languages like Spanish, French, German, and even Japanese, Chinese material are also available. In those kind of cases, we cannot even make use of it, especially if we want to look for, say, for example, Hindi we want, then we may not get much information on this open educational resources. So this is one of the limitations. And of course, sometimes the CC licenses, that is Creative Commons licenses, are not clearly described. That means whether you can actually share it with other people, we are not so sure, because that website did not clearly say whether it is kept under Creative Commons license or it is open to use. We are not so sure. And another major thing is, as information overload we always talk about. There are plenty and plenty and plenty of information. We may not even get the right information at the right time for us to use. So that means we have to spend a lot of time to figure it out. What is the relevant open educational resource that is available for us to use? Finding that is the major time consuming process. So sometimes we may be lucky, sometimes we may not be lucky. So we may get, we may not get. So we have to spend a lot of time on that. And why OER is not popular is basically the moral and ethical dilemma, because I'm going to use somebody else's material. Am I actually doing the right things? So this question will come to the teacher all the time, because the teacher want to share their own experiences, their own knowledge with other people. So if that is the case, I'm going to do, why should I take it from somebody else and share it with other people? So that kind of moral and ethical dilemma always comes to the teacher. And there is also lack of awareness. Like, I mean, I may not even know, for example, there is a very good quality material available in the internet, but I really don't know where it is and how to find it out. So there is a lack of awareness. And of course, many are not trained to properly use OER. That is also there. And non-availability of access to OER, digital education. Currently, we are moving to the digital education, but a few years back, there was not this much people who are using the digital education. And even if we have it, say, for example, there are very high quality videos that are available in the open educational resources, but our internet connectivity is so poor, our internet infrastructure is so poor, we cannot even access it. We know that it exists, we know that we can access, but unfortunately, we don't have the infrastructure to use it. So that is the major drawback due to which people may not use OER in a very regular basis. And fear of losing reputation. So this is also another thing. Like, if a teacher starts using lots of open educational resources in their classroom teaching, then many people will start asking, hey, why are you copying from other place and putting it in your lectures? That is not the right thing to do. You create your own. So otherwise the students will say, the teacher always copies from the internet and he posts. So these kind of things are also there, where as a teacher, we will lose our reputation is another major problem. So that is also one of the reasons people are not keen to use open educational resources. And especially if we take about India, we do not have financial resources to develop OER. Like we will hardly see some people developing OERs. And this is also seen as a lack of commitment to teaching, because many places the management also looks at it from a different point of view, that I asked the teacher to go and teach in the class, but he is just copying pasting something from the internet. So that is not the right practice to do. So people see this as a lack of commitment to teaching. So that is also one of the reason people are reluctant to use OER. And another thing is, like, as a teacher, I spent a lot of time in creating my lectures. So why should I have to give this to other people? Because I spent, like, 1 month or maybe 2 months in creating these lectures. So if other people want, let them create their own. Why I have to share that? So this kind of mentality also remains with some of the people. So we cannot simply blame that is wrong, but it may also be one of the reason why people are not using OER. And of course, establishing various resources is quite expensive. And we don't get OER in different multiple Indian languages. So this is also another problem, because we have many languages, and it's the major challenge for, especially for India, that we cannot create the same content material in all the different languages, because every language, the words are different, so the meaning actually changes when we translate into different languages. So that is also another reason we have limited access to OER, especially in Indian scenario. Another question is, like, okay, OER is really good. We talk about all these things, but why people don't want to, or they are not involved in creating OER? Mainly because of the time, because we already have lots of teaching workload. So at that time, we may not have enough time to develop something new. What we want to do is, whatever I have to cover in my syllabus, I just want to cover it. So that is where to create something new, to create something innovative, we do need a lot of time and resources. We don't have time, and we also do not have resources. See, this is also another thing. For example, if you want to create a good quality OER, you have to read some journals, you have to read some books. If you don't have access to those kind of things, how will you actually even create a very good quality OER? So this is also another major reason. And many people are not well versed with various softwares and other things. So that is also another reason. Many people may not even have a separate laptop, which is a high-end laptop with a video camera and other things. So many people use only mobile phone to teach their class also is happening. So that means we also have lack of skills and lack of materials. And of course, nobody gives a reward for creating a OER. That is also another thing. Like, when we don't get any rewards for creating OER, why should I have to do that? So that may also be one of the reasons people are not interested in creating. And finally, you created, but there is no support for you, that okay, you created, you share it to other people and other things. So in that case also, people are very hesitant to go into that direction. So here are some of the examples of various open educational resources that is available throughout the world. One is the MIT OpenCourseware. So you can visit this website and you can get lots of OpenCourseware material which are available depending on the subjects. You can also choose. As I mentioned, you can use all these resources as a supplementary material to your teaching learning process. And also, if you want, you can also learn new things from some of these videos and lectures, and we can also improve our teaching learning process. Multimedia, Merlot is another one where we can get a lot of information about the learning and the online teaching. OpenStax is a very, very good resource for books. So if you are looking for a book, please visit this openstax.org website. So they have different subjects, books are available, and these are actually curated materials, and various world-renowned professors had put their materials openly on this particular platform. And this is highly useful for the students, especially at the UG and PG levels. And I actually use this in my organic chemistry course on a regular basis, because many of our topics are overlaying here. So I always tell my students, okay, these are all the topics which you can actually visit, and you can get more information than what I teach in the class. And Kuriki, Khan Academy, most of the people will be available. And as I mentioned, Internet Archive is the biggest online library. So if you want here, you have to just register on this particular website, and they will even allow you to borrow the book for 10 days, 15 days, 1 week, like that. Things are also available. It is the the biggest online library. So I have actually borrowed many books, and some of the books are so rare that they are not available in any of the libraries, even in India. So in those kind of cases, they have this digital rights management. Adobe DRM is inbuilt in that particular program. So you have to install one or two softwares. Once you install those softwares, they will give you the book, and you have to log in to access that book, and you can actually go through the book very nicely. And this is another important thing. All of us as a teacher can actually make use of that, even if the book is not available in your library, and if it is available in this archive.org library, you can register and you can actually keep it for at least 10 days, 15 days, depending on the availability and the demand. You can actually keep that book with you for you to read it. So this is a very good resource, and this you can actually make use in your classroom lectures also. Say, for example, if you want some important images or maybe charts, you can recreate that and you can share it with your students very easily. So those are also possible because the book is available at your laptop itself. And the PHET is an interactive simulation. This is mainly for science and math subjects. You can see various simulations which are done in the physical mode, in the digital mode. So all this augmented reality and OER can be integrated with your classroom teaching learning things on a regular basis. So here I break for a minute, and if there is any questions, I want to take that.
Any queries from the participants? You can raise your hand.
I think Neeru Kurana had a couple of people are asking some questions. So I think Ruchika Bateja. Can you unmute these people so that they can ask the questions?
Dr. Ruchika, you can unmute and ask the question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hello.
Yes, madam.
So this is a general question. Do we have the access of these books free of cost, or we have to pay for these books?
These are free of cost. That's the reason I said like these are open educational resources. So all of them are free of cost. So they have like 7 days, 14 days, 1 month duration, depending on the demand.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other question?
Any other query?
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, can we say the Microsoft Power BI is the part of augmented reality?
No, actually, augmented reality has to be created separately through use an app. Through an app only we can develop, because it is not. See, the presentations we can use it for classroom teaching learning applications, but augmented reality is basically a software, separate software.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, how much more time we have?
We have around 15 to 20 minutes as per your convenience. That is no issue.
Then because we have to talk about the social media, so it will take another 10 or 15 more minutes. So
no issue. No, you can take. You can take.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Thank you. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is the use of social media. That means how we can integrate social media in our teaching learning process. One is like e-content, as you are already aware, we can use video contents, especially on YouTube or Vimeo. Through that, we can share our materials with the students. Another one is text or presentation. So SlideShare is one website where lots of people share their presentations and other things. So that also you can give to your students. So that is one way. You can also put your videos on your lectures or PDFs, presentations, everything on the SlideShare. You can create your own account and you can share with your own student. That is also another way. And for discussion forums for the classroom, people generally use WhatsApp. So along with WhatsApp, you can also use Telegram. Telegram is much better than WhatsApp. So some of the advantages what you have with the Telegram is most of the time the off-topic discussions, if it happens in the WhatsApp, the administrator cannot delete those things in a very easy way. Whereas in Telegram, you can actually delete each and every message which is not relevant to the discussion part. The administrator can easily delete it. And there are other advantages with the Telegram is like whatever you share, especially the documents, PDFs, videos, etc., they don't count towards your mobile storage. Whereas in the WhatsApp, whenever you share anything, that is actually downloaded and stored in the mobile phone. So that means the storage becomes used up very quickly if you share big videos and other things on the WhatsApp. Whereas in the Telegram app, it is actually uploaded to the cloud. So it is not being downloaded directly to the mobile phone. So that's the reason anybody can actually use it very effectively, and you can share even big files like 100 MB file, 200 MB files, even 1 GB file. You can actually share it with the students if you want. So that is the advantage of Telegram. And you can also put a lot of restrictions like what a student can share in the post, and you can also have whether they want to respond to some of the queries or other things. In WhatsApp, you only have admin only can post option, but in Telegram, you have multiple 8 permission levels are available. So based on that, you can actually set the permission for what the student can actually do in that. So Telegram is much better. And another major thing is like in WhatsApp, of course, 256 is a big number for many people. So none of the people have students more than 256 in a single class. So they can actually use one single WhatsApp. But the number of students who can be part, or the number of people who are part of a group, is unlimited in the case of Telegram. And for our MOOC online course, I have been using Telegram for a couple of years. So we have around 500, 600 students every time register in the Telegram app itself. Of course, for the course, we have around 3,000, 4,000 students register for the course. But only 1 in 6 students generally register for the Telegram app. So that way we can actually make use of these kind of things along with our regular discussion forums. And this is highly useful for a teacher. So these are some of the ways by which the social media can be used. And the most important thing I just want to talk about is blog. How can you use blog for your teaching learning process? So the first one is what to blog is a big question. I think many of you are fully aware of what is blogging and other thing. So anything and everything you care about, you can write in a blog. So what is the advantage of using a blog, or maybe what are the different things you can write? You can write your research or teaching style. You can use technology to improve the teaching learning styles, and you can talk about, see, mainly what is given here is many things what you can write in that blog. It can be about the innovative teaching methods, what you are doing. It can be sharing the best practices or discussing cool tricks, hacks like mnemonics and other things if you know and you want to share with the people. So you can actually write in a blog. You can also do a critical analysis of maybe some policies of particular things you can discuss. And you can also do curation of existing knowledge. Say, for example, there are many people, especially experts, who are doing this, like they are improving the knowledge of the learners by sharing lots of information through the blog. And you can also talk about your achievements, how you did some of these things. And you can also write about curiosity, what you are actually interested in. So these are the various types of blogs, what you can actually write. And why to blog? Of course, to provide content to prospective teachers, public, students. Say, for example, you want to attract more students for your college. So what you can do, we can actually write a blog why the student should come and join this particular course. What are the advantages, what are the benefits, and what are the job perspectives. So you can name it, you can actually write a very nice elaborative blog telling about why a particular student should actually take a course in your particular college. That is one way. Another way, you can also talk about what are the great things your department is doing, so that the public knows about, okay, this department is doing lots of good things. So all those things you can actually write in that blog. So to provide content to the prospective teachers, publics, students, etc. So to attract the people, you can write here. And another thing is, as a teacher, our main job is to dissemination of knowledge. So that also you can do. Now, I will also talk about what is the difference in sharing your notes and writing a blog. So there is a couple of differences are there. So I'll also briefly touch upon that. And by writing the blog, what happens is your writing skill also improves quite a bit, because you will actually do little bit of research and then only you start writing it. So that means we are also improving our own quality. And you can also increase the reputation among your peers. Say, for example, if you constantly write a blog, maybe one blog per month if you are writing, so all the fellow teachers will also say, hey, he's really actively doing something. So at least he's contributing to dissemination of knowledge. Like that, your peers also will give a very good feedback, and also your reputation among the students and as well as the teachers also increases. That all depends on the quality of the blog, what you write, and the questions what you actually pose in this particular blog, and then how do you actually work out the solution for that particular problem. And this also increases your networking, and this is also another way of supporting OER. And you can also inspire others, and you can also share some unique experience or perspective about particular things, because in many places people call this is very similar to a journal. Like, I mean, whatever you are writing in the diary, you are just writing in the blog. But it's not necessarily that way. You can also do some critical analysis. So that is where the level of your knowledge is very, very important here. So the better you can analyze a subject, then the people will really appreciate, yeah, this blog is very well written. And we can also talk about some of the difficulties what we are facing. Say, for example, digital education, how the students are facing problems. If they have a problem with mobile phone, how they can actually overcome that problem. Like that, you can also write about some general topics. So there is nothing like this is the topic you have to write as a teacher. So anything and everything you care about. So that is what is the blog. So basically what we can tell is the blog is basically the interactions of connecting the academic and the non-academic aspect. So academic aspect means, as a teacher, you teach. Your main job is to improve the teaching learning process. That's the only thing as a teacher you are doing. But through blog, what we can do is the same teaching learning process, the idea behind, the pedagogy behind, the history behind a particular topic you can write, which is a non-academic one, so that you can actually improve the interactions with the people. That means the social interactions can be improved a lot, because academic aspects are written in a very structured format, whereas the non-academic things can be written in a very conversational aspect. So that means here you don't talk about the academic rigor, what we expect in our classroom teaching learning materials. Whereas in the blog, you can write very well in a very, very friendly tone, the same thing. And this is going to be the bridge. The blog is the bridge between academic and non-academic interactions. So what are the contents of the blog? We can have three, that inverted triangle as we have shown here, a triangle, a square, and an inverted triangle. So what is the triangle? First triangle means this is the interaction part. That means we start from one single aspect and we little bit elaborate in the first paragraph. So the gist of the article is written in the introduction part. And then in the discussion part, you write about concisely about what you actually are discussing, or why you are discussing, or how this idea came to. So all those things can be kept in the middle part. And in the last part, in the conclusion, it is the upside down triangle. So in a nutshell, what we have discussed so far. So all these three things, a triangle, a square, and an inverted triangle, or the contents of your blog. So if you think in that, you precisely start from the single one point and you end up at the same one point at the end. But in between, you elaborate that thing. So this is what is the contents of the blog. And how to blog: first we identify what is the topic I want to write. Then we have to articulate what I am going to discuss, how I am going to tell about. Then we list out the bullet points, like what I am going to talk very specifically, then elaborate on the bullet points, and finally check for relevancy, authenticity, and accuracy, and share with the people. So this is how we can actually do that. Of course, this is the more structured approach of writing a blog. And if somebody wants, they can also randomly write, but then we will be losing that point, because if we are a little bit structured, then we can write less number of words about that topic in a much more effective way. So that's the reason, if we have a simple structured approach, it helps improve the quality of the blog, because there are thousands and thousands of people who write the blog. And why would somebody come and read your blog? So that means you have to be authoritative in writing that. And of course, we may not have that expertise to the maximum extent to write on the topic, but if we can actually articulate it in a much better way, that means that is what is actually required. And even if it is 2 paragraph or 3 paragraph, if we can precisely tell about that particular information or a topic, then that is how we can actually get the reputation from the other people. So first we have to identify the topic and focus on a particular target audience. So like, you want to write for your students, you want to write for a policy makers, or maybe for the government official, or maybe for the fellow teachers, or maybe for the common public. So you need to identify what is your target audience. So based on that, we have to write the things. Say for example, you are talking about a particular experiment. And when you want to talk about a particular experiment, you are not going to talk about that particular experiment to all the public. You are only going to talk about your students. Say, for example, I have been doing this experiment for several years, and I find these are all the problems the students generally face. And okay, these are all the solutions. If you face this problem, you can do this way. If you have the second problem, okay, you solve that by the second approach. Like that, you can actually create multiple scenarios, and you give solution to each and every scenario, keeping in mind it is the end user, that is the student is your end user. Now, this is one type of blog. Another blog, what you can write is like maybe the policy. Say for example, now people are having difficulty to access internet. So what are all the things required? Say for example, the infrastructure should be developed. As an individual, we cannot do it because we don't have the resources to do that. But then how effectively we can use it? Maybe 2-3 students can join together and they can actually watch the videos. And these are all the places where the student can actually get lots of information. Those kind of things you can write. And you can also talk about what is your college achievement. Say for example, your college 10 students have received a very good placement. Then you can talk about that also as a great achievement of your college. So you can write about we have followed these practices, the best practices we have used. So that's the reason our students were excelled in all their university examination, and they were also placed at so and so places. So we are very happy about that. So there you are writing to the public, to the parents, to the rest of the people, even to the prospective students. So you need to identify what is your audience. Based on that, you fine tune your writings. And then search for relevant resources. Say, for example, if you are going to talk about the placement of the students, then you do need to know if you can get some additional information about, okay, how many students participated in that event, and out of which how many students were placed in the first day, how many of the students placed in the fourth day, or maybe in the first week, or maybe in a particular stream, like that. Whenever you write, you actually have to add some data point to that writing. So that actually adds more weight to your writings. Otherwise, if simply say 15 students had actually got a job, Are Baba, 15 students, how many were actually there? From 1,000 students, if 15 students got a placement, or from 55 students, the 15 students got a placement. So that is a very, very crucial information. So the data points has to be very clear, so that the people know how much achievement you people are actually helping the student reach. That is what you can actually write. So you have to have the relevant resources to back up what you are saying. The next one is collect the materials. Then you can actually break them down into small chunks, write a blog, and then you can include citation if there is something. And then finally, you can share it with all the people. So choosing the title is very, very, very important, because that is what going to attract the people towards that particular blog, because there are thousands and thousands of blogs are there. So if somebody has to read your blog, then your title is the one which will attract the people towards it. So you have to be very careful in choosing the right title. Then what to avoid is another important thing. So don't write anything irrelevant to the topic in that blog, because we may be some examples I'll tell you. There are lots of movies they take. Many times when they direct a movie, there will be one main theme in that particular movie. So that message is clearly conveyed to the people within that 2.5 hours. Say, for example, if in that movie they have some 10 or 15 different things they talk about, then that is mainly irrelevant. Maybe they are interrelated to each other, but then the core issue is completely lost. So that is what in our blog also, when we write something which is irrelevant to the topic, then we have to avoid it completely. And then don't give incomplete information, because that is also, say for example, we give half the information and half the information we leave. Then people will say, oh, this is not an authentic information. They just left out half of that information. So that means, okay, don't read that blog. Yeah, this person doesn't write any useful blog like that, and they do it. So don't ever stop with the incomplete information. And also don't give questionable references. That's what we say in the fake news. So we simply write something because in the internet it is available, we simply wrote. So those has to be avoided, because questionable references should not be part of our blog. And this is the major thing. Don't complain about your supervisor or your subordinate, or maybe your management, or other people, because that is a very, very wrong thing to write. Because we simply think like, I just want to vent out what is in my mind, but the blog is not for venting out your inner feelings. So please avoid workplace rivalry issues. Say, for example, okay, I don't have a computer in my office. There is no ventilation. There is no AC. There is no this. There is no that. So all those things don't write in your blog. And also avoid anything related to burning or sensational topics. So this also, of course, it may attract quite a bit of people to your blog, but then also there will be quite a bit of criticisms which is coming out from that. One simple example I'll tell you, like if you look at our Neeraj Chopra, who received the Olympic medal, and he had been asked by many people to participate in many events. So what he did, he simply left India and he went to US for training and other things. So whenever there is something disturbing you, you try to avoid it. That is the best way to do that, and he perfectly did that. So our blog also has to be like that. If there is something which is sensational or burning issues, just avoid it. That is another way of improving your standards. And what are the different sites? Blogger is one website. WordPress is another thing. Here we need to be active. If somebody wants, they can also purchase a domain and they can blog. Medium is another one. So this is a much more important one. Medium is the authoritative one in many cases. The bloggers from this area, that is especially written on Medium, are highly accurate and authoritative in that. Substack and Tumblr are other places where you can also blog. So these are some of the things. And how to write a blog? You just keep 10 to 15 days, and because to write some good quality blog, you do need at least 10 to 15 days. And create a checklist what you are going to write, and mention who are targeted audience in the beginning itself, because this is I am going to talk about this experiment where the students are going to face problem. Like that, you just put that first sentence. This we are going to write about the achievement of our school for the general public. So like that, who is the target audience? You just mention that in the very first sentence, so that people exactly know, okay, who is going to be the person who has to read it. That way, the clarity is very clear for the people also. Otherwise, you talk about an experiment and the public layman comes and says, "Arey, why are you writing all this experiment? I don't even know about this experiment. Why you are explaining all these things like that?" They don't even like these kind of blogs. So write or mention who is the targeted audience in the first 1 or 2 sentences itself. And of course, how do you type? You exactly know. Don't type it directly in the blogger's website. So you first create that in a document, and you can start from basic to intermediate and write it in a conversational tone. So this is very, very important. And when we write, we don't write like take say for example, this compound is added with that compound, like that. Don't say. You say, okay, you take this in this particular beaker, and then you go to the weighing balance. Okay, you just now weigh that second material, like that. You speak as if like you are talking to a person personally. So that is what the personal touch is very, very essential in the case of blogs. So write it in a conversational tone. And if you can add some images, resources, references, that also you can add it. So that will also increase the authenticity of the information. And format your document, proofread for errors, and then publish. So with that, I conclude now. It's 12:40. I think 10 minutes past the time. So can we come back?
Dr. Balaji, actually, you are such a wonderful speaker. So it is always a privilege to listen to you. And keeping in consideration the constraints of time, I think we should stop here. And I request Jinesh sir to ask the audience if they have any query.
Any query from the audience? Please raise your hand.
Yeah, sometimes when it is too elaborate, people don't even ask questions. Otherwise, it may be way above their heads, so they also don't ask the question. So I don't want to differentiate which one it
But
is.
the
So
wonderful presentation. You have deliberated a lot of things and touched even we could not imagine. So I hope in the times to come, the people will actually use these technologies and integrate all these things. So I'm really grateful to you, sir.
okay, thank
Thank,
you. Sorry, I
thank you.
took 10 minutes extra. I'm so sorry for that.
No
Thank
issue,
you.
no issue.
Thank you very much, sir, for enlightening us. It was really an informative session, and this will definitely help us in improving the teaching learning processes through effective utilization of ICT. Now I request Madam Meenu Gupta, IQAC coordinator, to present vote of thanks.
JJ sir, am I audible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. So very good afternoon to our distinguished guest, Principal Sir, my dear colleagues, and all the participants. On behalf of Management and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Shri Aurobindo College of Commerce and Management, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to Honorable Speaker of the Day, Professor Dr. B.S. Balaji, who spared time from his busy schedule to grace the occasion and enlighten us about ICT integration for effective teaching learning process. Thank you, sir. It was very insightful, informative, and thought-provoking session that I have ever had the privilege to listen to. And I found myself captivated by every word you said. Undoubtedly, in today's challenging and unpredictable scenario, it has become mandatory for all to come forward and make oneself abreast with the use of ICT in education to achieve better outcomes regarding teaching learning process. Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank our principal, Professor Dr. Vishal Kumar, for his enthusiastic support and guidance for organizing this webinar. My heartfelt thanks to all the participants. A special thanks to the organizing team who have been the backbone of this event and made this event a huge success. Now, before we move to the end of this webinar, may I request everyone to please turn on their cameras for a group photograph. Everyone, please switch on your cameras. Thank you all for being with us. Have a nice day. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Balaji.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Sir.
Okay, thank you.